Tomorrow, October 7th, is the one-year anniversary of this ongoing armed conflict between Israel and the Hamas-led Palestinian militant groups in the Gaza Strip. As many of you know, a few months before October 7th, I led a group of 20 people from this congregation on a 10-day pilgrimage. We spent half our time in Israel and half our time in Palestine and the West Bank, of course, not in the Gaza Strip. And we were led by both an Israeli and a Palestinian tour guide who were in dialogue the whole time. I have spoken in, recently over 10,000 words from this pulpit about Israel and Palestine, and we've hosted sermons from both Jewish and Palestinian peace activists. There's not time to recreate all of that nuance and context this morning, but I also cannot let this anniversary pass without recognizing it. If you're interested in more details or my recommended resources for learning more or taking action, they're available at frederickuu.org/pilgrimage. I continue to look toward all of the individuals and groups who are committed to co-creating a world in which all Palestinian lives matter and all Israeli lives matter. And in this Sunday service in which we are focusing on the UU value of pluralism, I'm holding in my heart multiple truths. There are many of them. I will limit myself to two that feel particularly poignant in this moment. One truth is that on October 6th, 2023, the day before the heinous October 7th Hamas terrorist attacks, there was not peace in Palestine. There was a blockade of the Gaza Strip, an occupation of the West Bank, no end in sight for either, and no clear, peaceful pathway toward a Palestinian state, toward dignity, toward self-determination. Another truth is that right now we are in the midst of the Jewish High Holy Days, an annual time of repentance and renewal. A sincere Lashana Tovah to all who celebrate. That includes my own household. My wife is Jewish, and as are many members and friends of this congregation. But I want to be honest that it's hard to celebrate the high holy days right now as Benjamin Netanyahu, who I can only describe as a corrupt and ruthless right-wing leader of Israel, continues to lead this relentless campaign of escalating violence. This whole idea of escalating to de-escalate is trying to have sex for virginity. It's not going to work. By no means am I trying to conflate Judaism and Israel. I'm only lamenting the difficulty of trying to practice repentance and renewal when the death toll keeps rising. The hostages still aren't home, and this regional conflict is widening. This prolonged conflict has rightly been described as right versus right. Both sides have legitimate claims and legitimate grievances, and if you're in the right, it's really hard to let go. Why should you? You're right. But this resulting dynamic of both sides feeling they're in the right is leading to this dynamic of blame and punishment and destruction that has both sides trapped in this entrenched habitual pattern of violence and suffering. The present chapter of this conflict has also been described, again, I think rightly, as leadership of the worst versus the worst, meaning Netanyahu and far-right Israeli politics in general, as well as Sinwar and the radicalized Hamas movement in general. They are among the worst imaginable leaders in terms of reaching a peaceful resolution. And the leadership of our own country, the United States, is deeply complicit in refusing to use almost any leverage to try and force a ceasefire and is instead just continuing to throw fuel on the fire. There's a lot more to say, but on the eve of this terrible anniversary, I want to invite you to hear two poems. They're things that I've been holding on to, and I think poetry, it can seem weak, but it can also, Dickinson said, tell the truth and tell it slant. I think it can also point us toward yet here as to for unimagined possibilities. The first of the two poems is titled The Place Where We Are Right. It's by Yehuda Amichai. In 1948, he was a soldier in the First Arab-Israeli War. Let's hear that again. The First Arab-Israeli War in 1948. We're still going. He was a soldier in that war. As a result of his experience on the battlefield, he became an advocate for peace and reconciliation. You can also Google combatants for peace in Israel and Palestine if you want to see some contemporary soldiers also saying this has to end. He was often involved with dialogues with Palestinian poets and writers. This poem was born out of that work for peace. It goes like this. From the place where we are right, from the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right, it is hard and it is trampled like a yard. But doubts and love, they dig up the world like a mole, like a plow, and a whisper can be heard where the ruined house once stood. We need a lot more doubt and a lot more love on both sides. Doubt about all this one-sided righteousness and grievance that is unable to admit the places where we're also wrong. And love for all the people in this war-torn region, all of the Palestinians and all of the Israelis. We saw so much doubt and so much love from so many Palestinians and so many Israelis. Peace is possible, but the people are being failed by their leaders and by our leaders. If you go to the resources at frederickuu.org/pilgrimage, I have a list of many groups pointing a way forward together. I'm going to limit myself to only one for now, A Land for All. I encourage you to take some time later this afternoon. Google A Land for All, and it won't take you long, but read some about their path toward peace. It's not the only way. It's the most compelling way I've found. Prior to October 7th, approximately 2.2 million Palestinians lived in the Gaza Strip. Despite the horrific killing of more than 40,000 Palestinians, too many of whom are civilians and children, there remain more than 2 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The Palestinians are not going anywhere. There is no military solution to this problem. In turn, Israel is a nuclear power. As far as I can see, I don't think Israel or the Israelis are going anywhere either. And an increased number of Israeli settlements in the West make, as far as I can see, and many experts, a two-state solution is no longer possible. That ship has sailed. Keep in mind that we're fighting over a thin strip of land approximately the same size as the state of New Jersey. The extremists on both sides are currently willing to settle for nothing less than all of the land for their side alone, and that's just going to keep the conflict going. What will it take to realize the only sane option is to share the land? It's the only way for both sides to get what they want: access to the whole land. If I could wave a magic wand, I would create an educational system for every Israeli, every Palestinian, adult and child, that both would learn Arabic. Everyone would learn Arabic. Everyone would learn Hebrew. Everyone would learn about the Holocaust, and everyone would learn about the Nakba. And everyone would go through a South African-style Truth and Reconciliation Commission. My deepest hope is that something like that can eventually happen. There are historic examples of conflicts like this one that seemed never ending until suddenly they did. Northern Ireland springs immediately to mind. No one thought that was going to end, and then the Good Friday Accords happened. Heck, the 100 Years' War in Europe, that actually was like 114 years. We're only 76 years into this current conflict. Only? I hope we don't have decades to go. I'll conclude by inviting you to hear a second poem that continues to be on my heart as we prepare for this terrible and wrenching anniversary tomorrow. It's titled Decisions by Boris Novak. Between two words, choose the quieter one. Between word and silence, choose listening. Between two books, choose the dustier one. Between the earth and the sky, choose a bird. Between two animals, choose the one who needs you more. Between two children, choose both. Between the lesser and the bigger evil, choose neither. And between hope and despair, choose hope, because hope will be harder to bear. This morning is part 2 of a 9-part sermon series on living our UU values and covenant. We will continue to revisit this theme once a month this congregational year to learn more about our new UU values and covenant adopted this past summer at UU General Assembly, which will be where in June? Baltimore. You should all plan to go. Google UU General Assembly. Hope to see you in Baltimore with 5,000 of your closest UU friends. You can also find the values and covenant on the back of your order of service. Last month, we focused on our value of interdependence. And this month, we're turning to our value of pluralism, which says, we celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. There's a lot to say about all of our values and covenant statements. I'll highlight just 3 for now about pluralism, 1 from each sentence. In the first sentence, celebrate is particularly significant. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. Some of us who grew up being told to tolerate those who are different than you, that's kind of, at best, that's what I was taught in South Carolina. Toleration is an improvement over hatred or active persecution, something I also was sometimes taught in South Carolina. But toleration, it still has a negative connotation. It too often comes from a place of superiority in which one is deigning to be tolerant of the other. It's all the difference in the world to celebrate pluralism and diversity. In the second sentence, I would underscore responsible. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The last part of that sentence is imported directly from our previous 4th principle. And I want to add a caution about how our 4th principle has sometimes been abused. Some UUs have periodically used this principle to defend harmful behavior. They conveniently seem to only remember the free part, whereas our actual value, the part that actually helps us skillfully navigate difference and pluralism, is our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We are free, but we also have responsibilities for one another. You may be familiar with that classic liberal line, your right to swing your fist ends when it hits my nose. In the third sentence, I would highlight curiosity. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. In addition to the importance of keeping love at the center and being respectful, curiosity can be incredibly helpful for navigating our differences. And one little caveat here, that if you're curious about something, you don't always have to ask the person to explain it. Try Googling it. You might learn some things there without asking people to do emotional labor on your behalf. None of us have all the answers, and if you ever find yourself getting defensive, I invite you to notice if curiosity might help. Why is this particular behavior bothering me so much? Is it really about the other person? Or is there maybe something about me and my past experience? Does this person remind me of my dad or my mom or my brother or that bully that used to, it's like, is this really about them, or is this maybe why I'm having this exaggerated response? Maybe it's something about me too, my shadow. And or is there something I might learn that might help me better understand, celebrate, and embrace our differences? As UUs, we've often done a fairly good job with pluralism, more or less, even as we have a long way to go to really co-create this diverse, multicultural, beloved community that we dream about. Pluralism, it's kind of one of our big things. As you hear me say at the beginning of each Sunday service, we draw from all the world's religions, balanced with the insights of modern science. Hang around here long enough and this pluralistic approach can become to seem commonplace and obvious. And I agree, it's a great way to experiment with being in the world. But if you go out and start telling random people that there's this big tent congregation with some members who are Buddhist and others who are Christian and still others who are pagan or Jewish or Muslim or Hindu and various other religious traditions and others who are atheist and agnostic and humanist, and that we all regularly gather under one roof for one common Sunday service together, a lot of people will think you are out of your mind. Sure, you have all this theological and philosophical diversity and you don't kill each other. Yeah, right. Except it's true. We've been here for years. One reason that pluralism, that skillfully navigating difference is important, it relates back to that previous entry in this sermon series on interdependence. Because we all are part of this interdependent web of all existence. We are all in this together on a deep existential level. As Dr. King used to say, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. That because we're all part of this interdependent web, and if you jiggle any one part of the web, another part vibrates. Climate change, which we're going to talk about in depth next week, is another stark reminder of the fact that whatever happens anywhere on this planet affects everywhere else, either positively, negatively, or both. So since we are all in this together, how can we best embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect? We're not going to be perfect, as many of you have heard me say before. I promise you this, we are saved from perfection. But as we learn and grow, you're saved from perfection. But as we learn and grow, we can strive to be increasingly loving, increasingly curious, and increasingly respectful. Here's another underappreciated point. As you use, we are pluralists. We celebrate that there are many legitimate ways of being and growing in the world and becoming, not just one way. But we're not relativists. We don't believe that just anything goes. There are bad faith actors in the world, people with a track record as con men, demagogues, snake oil salesmen, hucksters, charlatans, cheats, frauds, swindlers. The fact that we have so many words for this should make us be aware that it's something to pay attention to. And we don't have to naively pretend that such folks are operating in good faith and welcome them into our pluralistic big tent without guardrails, limits, or boundaries. To say more about working with these facets of pluralism, I want to share with you some insights from the writer, activist, and facilitator, Adrienne Maree Brown. Who's read some of her work? All right, so just a few hands. She's written a lot of great books, but for our focus on pluralism, I want to draw from three in particular: Holding Change, We Will Not Cancel Us, and Loving Corrections. Here's what Brown has to say about dealing with bad faith actors. She says, when I don't believe that someone cares about my work, much less my life, I close myself to their critiques. Now, when I know someone loves me and wants to see me thrive, I seek out their feedback even when it's hard to hear. I've also learned that feedback from others should not be received as the truth, but as a truth. I used to let each, and see if you can identify with this, I certainly can. I used to let each morsel of feedback decenter me until I was quite lost from who I am and how I feel about things. Now I take feedback in as something currently true to someone who loves me. This is currently true to someone who loves me. I let it simmer and distill, and I keep what is useful to me, and I let go of the rest. I keep what I can work with and grow in. That approach seems quite wise to me. Brown is also an inspiring poet, and I want to invite you to hear a related poem she wrote titled, Trust the People, a Spell. Trust the people who move toward you and already feel like home. Do you know what I'm talking about? People that feel like home? You can feel it in your body. Trust the people who move towards you and already feel like home. Trust the people to let you rest. Trust the people to do everything better than you could have imagined. Trust the people and they become trustworthy. Trust that the people are doing their work to trust themselves. Trust that each breach of trust can deepen trust or clarify boundaries. You know, it's like, thank you for letting me know that for the future. Trust the people who revel in pleasure after hard work. Trust the people who let children teach and remind us how to emote, to be still, and to laugh. Trust the people who see and hold your heart. Trust the people who listen to the whales. Trust the people, and you will become trustworthy. Trust the people and show them your love. trust the people. That all sounds great, and I'm on board with it, but I should emphasize that Brown is not speaking theoretically or naively. She has been in the trenches of very diverse, pluralistic social justice movement spaces for years. She is clear from her lived experience that such spaces, and I certainly know she would include UU congregations, can sometimes feel extremely volatile and reactive. I don't know if you've ever been in a volatile and reactive social justice space. We sometimes end up, she says, spending the majority of our time pointing out each other's shortcomings and failures or building blaming narratives about each other. Brown calls these dynamics collective fragility or movement fragility. As you can see from the titles of her book, she is inviting us to learn practices to be able to co-create communal containers in which we can better hold change, correct one another lovingly, and not cancel one another except when harm demands that we draw boundaries. I want to say more about the practices that can help, but first I invite you to hear another related poem titled An Invitation to Brave Space by Mickey Scott Bay Jones, about how we can strive to be together amidst our pluralistic diversity. Together we will create brave space, because there is no such thing as safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world and to amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and to more love. We have the right to start somewhere and to continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. That's the part where you're wrong, not just right. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it can be our brave space together, and we can work in it side by side. To be able to show up wisely and skillfully and compassionately in diverse, pluralistic, brave spaces, Brown recommends we often need to start by doing our own work. She recommends 4 practices in particular. The first, because it is so essential, she says in triplicate: meditation, meditation, meditation. Now, if Buddhist meditation isn't your jam, you can pick the spiritual practice of your choice, which could range from exercise to music to art to being outside in nature and more. The point is, what are the practices that center you, that settle your nervous system and help you let go and move through whatever you are holding? It can be essential to do such practices to have any chance of showing up in brave spaces, not in a volatile, reactive way, but in a healthy, grounded way. Second, Brown recommends the etymologically related word mediation. Specifically, she means making sure you have a skilled facilitator to help hold and shape all that might emerge in brave space. If you're curious to learn more details or feel called to be a more skilled facilitator yourself, she's written a whole book about it. And her books aren't particularly long, so it's taught Holding Change, the Way of Emergent Strategy, Facilitation, and Mediation. Brown's third recommended practice to prepare yourself for showing up well in diverse, pluralistic, brave spaces is boundaries. And my favorite definition of boundaries comes from the therapist, activist, and writer Prentice Hemphill. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. Me loving you matters, but so does me loving me. And that last part can too easily get dropped or steamrolled over. If I too often defer to other people's needs and preferences, relationships can get into a toxic, what I think of as the giving tree dynamic. A terrible, terrible children's book. Recycle your copy. In which one of us gives and gives and gives, and the other takes and takes and takes until the giver is cut down to a stump. Boundaries are a reminder that we all matter very much, including ourselves. Or Brown says it this way in another of her important books titled Pleasure Activism. Your no makes way for your yes. Boundaries create the container within which your yes can be authentic. Being able to say no is the only thing that makes yes a choice. Consent. Her fourth and final recommended practice to prepare yourself for showing up well in diverse, pluralistic, brave space is truth-telling. In her words, learn to speak the truth, learn to hear the truth, and learn to honor that there are many truths, not just yours, and become allergic to anything that isn't the truth. When I was younger, I was often eager to speak the truth. In retrospect, I can see the ways in which I was erring on the side of what might be called brutal honesty. Anybody else ever done that? As I've grown older, I'm still far from perfect, but I have gotten better at trying to speak the truth in love. Or in Brown's words, the operative word in loving corrections is loving. That view feels deeply resonant with our UU values, in which we're seeking to put love at the center. And I look forward to continuing to explore with you what it means that love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. For now, in that spirit of pluralism, as we seek to co-create a world of collective liberation in which we all finally get free, I invite you to turn in your teal hymnals. We're going to sing a song that is written out of the South African anti-apartheid movement. As you prepare to go into the rest of this day and the week to come, may you continue your journey with love, just like that graphic with love at the center. Care for one another, care for this one earth, do justice, and make peace. And as you go, whatever taste or touch you've had in this time or place of hope, of love, or peace or joy, even just a little glimpse of any of that, that goes with you into the world. We're different for having spent this time together. May you live boldly. May you live with thanksgiving.